So we're going to begin this program talking about evergreens in the garden and even some deciduous things, the things that lose their leaves like the magnolia. And I had a video that we had hoped to use, and Bryn Wallace had come over. She is our fantastic photographer in our marketing section, and I enjoy working with her, particularly when we're out in the garden. And I did an arrangement, a really large arrangement, because I wanted to use this huge flower from the Mahonia Bielii. It's just in beautiful bloom right now. Unfortunately, we can't show the video, but Sally has emailed it to all of you. And so I would love to have you check that out, because I'm pretty specific about the various things that I've used in that arrangement. But in the meantime, Bryn also took a still picture of that. So let's bring that up, Danny, the first picture, okay? And we'll just talk a little bit about that. It has, as I said, primarily evergreens that are interesting. And Bryn wasn't terribly happy with the lighting at this particular moment, so it doesn't show up the colors as much. But I did this in a large container. And you're probably saying, ooh, I can't take that to my dining table. Well, maybe not. But it certainly could be used in an entry, or it could be used on a covered porch. This particular container would not be winter hardy. And so I created this by using a large block with foil to hold any water in the top of this container. So there is no water in that container per se, but it certainly could be used where it is protected on a covered porch or in an entry, or just the idea of how interesting these various things can do. And I'm going to pull up just a few of the things that are in that, plus some others. So let's take a look at what I have here in front of me and talk about this just for a moment. Okay, Danny, let's move on and take that one down. Hold on that for a moment. Let me talk about these, okay? So the large thing that I have in there, and I've trimmed this one way down, is Mahonia. And it's beautiful at this time of the year. And as I said in that video, you have all these lovely, soft yellow flowers coming out at this time of the year. And after that, it sets droops of beautiful bluish purple berries, which eventually the birds love. And we're all in tune with planting for the birds, bees, and butterflies. Right now, we're talking about planting for beauty within your garden, and beauty that you can bring inside, make clippings of, and use as part of your arrangements. If you've got shady areas, a cuba is beautiful, okay? I'm about to make a mess here. Okay, let me pull this Akuba out. I love this. I love this. So do the deer. But we are going to talk about the deer in a little bit, okay? And then there's osmanthus. This is a beautiful variegated one. And I love my Nandina. I hadn't used the berries in that, but the branches of those red, wonderful red color that a lot of them have at this time of the year is just incredible. And certainly you do want some green. I'm not suggesting that you have all variegated in your garden, but camellias are a wonderful green. Boxwood are a wonderful green. And perhaps in the fall, you planted some kale. I love the kale because it'll go through the winter. It'll take harsh weather and come through, particularly this wonderful green and the red boar. These are lovely, and they can be picked to come inside and be a part of your design. Now let's go back to the garden, Danny, and show just a few things that are going on in my garden right now, okay? This is a wonderful, now this has been here for years, and this shows you what you can do beneath large trees, beneath shrubs that lose their leaves, the deciduous shrubs. It's amazing what you can do with these small bulbs. I love this little one, the little snowdrops, and they do seed about beautifully. This area only started with a few a number of years ago, and now it's a mass of those. Let's continue with a few of those slides, Danny. Uh, in that same general area, there are a lot of hellebore. So I have a lot of shade, a lot of part shade, because the deciduous trees allow a lot of sun to come in when these plants need it most. So you will find a lot of the bulbs, particularly the small ones, a lot of helleborus. I haven't done this yet. This is from last year. But soon it will be time to trim away the old foliage. It's basically evergreen, but at this time of the year, usually in February, early March, those leaves look pretty tattered. And so you trim those away. And I lightly mulched beneath that to make it look tidy. Okay, let's continue with that. So I wanted to show you several areas where I have used those. Okay, these helleborus are pretty promiscuous. They drop their little seeds and you get numerous little plants. Now, that may not please everybody, but it certainly pleases me because I have not met a helleborus that I did not like. And so I enjoy a lot of the older ones. And continuing through these slides pretty quickly now. This is one of my favorite ways to bring helleborus inside, and that is to float them in a low dish of water. So many beautiful ones out there. I wouldn't even begin to tell you their names because, as I said, they cross, and I'm pleased with what those crosses look like. And there are a lot of new ones on the market today. And I really do encourage you to plant these, particularly in underneath trees and around your deciduous shrubs. I love using these in the garden and I love bringing them in the house. And guess what? The deer, for me, don't bother the helleborus. Okay, next one. Here's one from a couple of years ago that was a trial one that I put in. Unfortunately, I can no longer remember its name, if it had a name. But we do have a lot, and we have a lot coming in even this week. And in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will have a lot more. So I encourage you to put in some helleborus. They're almost foolproof. Next one, please. Here's just a view where my narcissus and daffodils are beginning to come into bloom. And I do encourage you to plant a lot of those. Those are the ones that the deer don't eat either. And the next one, please. Okay, tulips. It's pretty well known that a lot of the tulips are not great at coming back year after year, so we don't really always consider them to be perennial. But when you have the opportunity next season, plant some of the species tulips. These are growing again in part shade among the tiarella that loves to be a beautiful ground cover there. And so I have an extensive number of the various small bulbs that are planted in this area that give a continuity of bloom. And I go out and cut some of those and bring them in the house because I like to enjoy them there. Next one. Okay, there's another picture of some of those. And this is planted with an interesting plant. This one is a hardy geranium, maculatum, and it blooms in the early spring, beautiful blooms, but the foliage is so fragrant that when you touch it, it's just delightful. And it actually is pretty much evergreen, which is really great. And the next one, please. Another great one that I can use for cutting also and grows in part shade is pulmonaria. Many different types of pulmonaria after it blooms, and you can bring those blooms inside. After it blooms, the foliage is lovely. Let's take a break for a second from those slides and let me just show you something back here. I love to put, when you're talking about arrangements, okay, there are a number of large arrangements here. Most of which I've done for the marketing, and Bryn gets pictures of them. But I really do enjoy putting little bouquets over my kitchen sink because there's a ledge there and a big window. That's one of my favorite ways. And so I love to collect little vases, which I can use for that purpose. I don't know if we can show, if you can see clearly, this is one of the newer varieties of Helleborus whose foliage is just as interesting as the flowers. And here are some of those little snowdrops that I brought inside to put on the windowsill. And I love them displayed just by themselves in a fun little container. So that's a great one. Now, another one that I want to mention that's going on outside right now, because I really walked out into the garden center here at Fair Oaks and picked some of the hardy jasmine. This is jasmine nudiflorum, and it's just beginning to come into bloom, and there's so many buds on there that they will continually open up, and that's a fun one too. So these are things that you can enjoy right now. And while I was walking along, there's a lovely creeping thyme that's cascading over the little wall back there, and it's almost burgundy. So that's a fun thing. These are the things that you can think about using from your garden as cut flowers. Now, sometimes we get some surprises. So I want to share with you one of those surprises. I love doing things in small containers, as I said, to put over the kitchen sink or on my little kitchen table. And so actually before Christmas, I used some of the Christmas greens, and I had picked some of my hydrangea and I let it go dry. And actually, I think it's quite pleasing right now because the deep green and some of the blues of the spruce and the various things have totally dried in this. And of course, the hydrangea has totally dried also. I'm still enjoying it over my kitchen sink, though it's beginning to drop now. It's 2 months this way. It's beginning to drop right now. And so I think I'll have to say bye-bye and bring in some of the other little flowers from outside. But I do very much enjoy all of those things. And as I said, sometimes you just get these fun surprises. Ooh, that dried really nicely. I love it. Let's continue with some of these, Danny. He is such good help, you know. He runs the pictures for me. Okay, that was the pulmonaria. It's a low growing perennial. And it's still in evidence right now. It isn't terribly beautiful in the wintertime, but it's lovely in the spring. Okay. All right, here is one of the arrangements that I did that Bryn Wallace took this arrangement picture. It's using the daffodils, it's using some of the tulips. It has some branches in it. It's wonderful to use the spring branches. You can use forsythia. There's so many that are lovely, or even that jasmine that I showed you could be used in something like this. And it's just, that's a basket, yes, and obviously a basket doesn't hold water. And so I sat a glass container down inside of here, and the arrangement is sitting in water within that basket. Okay. Next one. There we go. Where do I use these things? You walk the walk in your yard. Watch the movement of the sun and see where you get a lot of sunshine or less. Decide if it's the sunshine, does it get a minimum of 6 to 8 hours? You can grow almost anything. And if it gets morning sun and dappled light, then you might want to go to some of those things that love shade, okay? But this is one border within my garden that has a constant bloom going on in it. This is what you're looking for. It has a lot of perennials, some of which have died back right now. And now at that time of the year, when the azaleas are just coming into bloom, it is filled with different varieties of daffodils. Okay. Now, all right, we talk about cutting garden. I've certainly tried it. Okay. This is my vegetable garden, and you can see there's onions growing there. There's some leftover greens, possibly some turnips or whatever. And in the back of that, in the fall, I had put in white and yellow tulips so that I would have some for cutting. Some occasion was coming up. And so I lined them down at the bottom of this vegetable garden. And I also put in some of the bulbs of the Dutch iris. So that became a cutting garden, but it was lovely. Actually, it was so lovely, I really didn't want to cut it very much. Okay, here we go again, Danny. Now, of value, of course, are always the trees that bloom in the spring. And this one is that beautiful deciduous magnolia. It's one of the little girls series, only it's not a little girl. It's probably 20 feet tall at this point in the game, and absolutely beautiful. But there are so many other flowering trees that you can harvest some of those branches and bring them inside to enjoy them too. Okay. This one is a viburnum. Exact name of that one, it's been in such a long time, but it is very similar to one called popcorn, which I know that we carry here and is just as beautiful. Has a slightly different pinkish cast to it, popcorn does, when it ages. But this is a delight to bring inside and to use in arranging. Okay. Now, this is just an overview of my back garden. And now realizing that my garden is very old. And so things have gotten, a lot of them, very well established. I have a lot of azaleas, and they can be picked judiciously and brought inside. I love the dogwood, comes inside beautifully. Red bud, those are just a few of the things that I enjoy arranging. And I love Japanese maple. And you can also harvest those for that beautiful red leaf to include in your arrangements. Okay. Here is another one that Bryn took the picture of. And actually, I have used the young, tender growth of the red bud. And I believe that's lilac that I put in there with that. So, and very fragrant. So you bring some of that fragrance inside. It's a very simple arrangement that could be used anywhere. Okay. Here's another one that Bryn took, using that viburnum, the branches of the viburnum and of azalea primarily. I think there's a little golden deutzia in there. Deutzia, it's a shrub, and a nice size shrub. When you're thinking about these shrubs, look at the ultimate growth of those and think about the space that you're putting it in, and try to buy one that's not going to super overgrow that space. There are so many out there to choose from today, thanks to all these wonderful hybridizers, that you can be very judicious in your choices. Okay. All right. You're always going to hear this from me. Start them young. Little Rose is playing with a daffodil. So it's an introduction. We want to encourage our children. We want them to understand the nature around them and the importance of that. And certainly today is almost more important than it's ever been, because they need to get outside and maybe get away from those notebooks, etc. And the next one. Okay, this is out in the narcissus and daffodils when they are in full bloom. All of my grandchildren go to those things because they love to pick them, and that's why they're there. Okay, as I said, include your children in the garden, regardless of their ages. There's one suggestion that I have: don't set them to pulling weeds. Give them some other tasks that they might enjoy, maybe a few weeds, but yeah, weeding has to be done, but they're not terribly fond of that job, okay? So find something that they'll be intrigued with, particularly encourage them to grow vegetables. A lot of them have no idea where these vegetables come from. We had more of this last year. I'm hoping that we're going to have a lot more of it this year. And a lot of this can be done in containers where you don't have to worry about weeds. Okay, Danny. All right. All right. Here's a fun one. Now, these are kind of throwbacks. Most of these kids are almost grown now or are grown now, but they all still love to be in the garden. And the one with the trowel here is all grown up now. And he helped his mother, and he helped me so much from the time he was very young that he comes over periodically and gives me a hand in the garden. Last spring, he actually built a very sweet little stone wall for me. So I'm so pleased. Let's come back to me for a second, Danny. I like to tell you about the tools that I particularly like. And for those of you who've watched before or been to my seminars, you'll hear me talk about the same things because those tools last. We sell these wonderful, wonderful tools. Okay, what is the name of this particular tool? It's Wilcox All Pro. We've sold them for a number of years, and I'm always saying to James downstairs here at the Fair Oaks location, James, do we have these in stock? This is the longest one of those trowels. It is absolutely my favorite. It is the one that Liam is using in that picture. Why? Because it has leverage. It really goes in and pries up without so much effort. And when you are a little older, you appreciate the less effort. Okay, wonderful. So I'm told that you get a coupon with watching some of these. So put this on your list. It is wonderful. Now there are others too. There's shorter ones, and they all each have a purpose. But this is my top of the line favorite. Okay, talking about that. All right, let's come back to those slides. Okay, there we go. Yep, there he is, Liam with that wonderful trowel. Okay. All right, let's talk for a second about this because I don't want this to be my last slide. I like to leave you with pleasant things. Yes, Bambi. Okay, we all feel differently about Bambi, and we're all entitled to our own thoughts. Okay. I'm not as fond of Bambi as I once was because Bambi was not in my area when I came there, but we have given sanctuary to all these deer, and they have no enemies, or they have very few enemies. Okay. The automobile, unfortunately, is the biggest one. Now, coming back to me again, I want to show you the product that I use. Danny, let's come back to me, honey. Yeah. Okay. I primarily use a repellent called Bobex. There is also one that's Bobex for the deer, for the rabbits too, okay? Because a lot of people have problems with rabbits. I don't have a problem with rabbits because I have beautiful fox, and I love the fox because they take care of some of the nuisance things in the garden, okay? I buy the concentrated form, and I use a pump sprayer because I have a lot of plants. This is not washed off by rains or normal rains anyway, and so once a month is usually adequate, except in the spring When you're getting that constant new growth, you need to do it more often. There are other repellents on the market, and people have their favorites among them. Some like to swap off. I have used Bibex consistently for many years, and when I use it appropriately, and don't forget, I have no problem. They don't eat it. And so that I highly recommend. Alrighty, now we can go back, Tammy. Yeah. Pass the deer. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk to you for just a minute about some of the things that bloom in early spring going into summer. And I particularly want to talk to you about some of these because they're started from seed. And we have a wonderful selection of seed at the moment. So this is a grand time to go ahead and purchase some of those because hopefully our supply is better than it was last year, because so many people were gardening last year that seeds were difficult to come by. Okay, this one is larkspur. We don't grow delphinium well in this area. It's too hot in the summertime, but we do grow larkspur well. I absolutely love this as a cutting garden, and I have seeded it quite a lot in an area that gets probably 7 hours of direct sun per day, and these things thrive. This is the area that I call my bird, bee, and butterfly garden, and I have all the plants in there that they love and that I love to cut from those areas. And I allow some of that to go to seed. Now, in the next segment, I'm going to discuss a little more in depth how I do this. You will see in many gardening magazines gorgeous, gorgeous displays of large gardens that have all of these things in it. What they so often don't talk about is maintenance. And believe me, there is maintenance to everything. But this is a large area. So if you're doing it in small spaces, then you don't have as much maintenance. But larkspur, and let's see what the next slide is, Danny. Okay, there's larkspur with another one called feverfew. Feverfew is a perennial, and it's of the chrysanthemum family. And they keep changing these names. Anyway, feverfew is a good one. And you'll usually, if we have it, you'll find it among the herbs. But we also, it comes back from seeds because it seeds around prolifically. I don't consider those plants that seed a great deal a problem as long as they're easy to remove, to pull up, because sometimes you have to do that with a few of these. Okay, and I think the next one may show the bachelor button. Yes, the bachelor, well, what I used to call bachelor's buttons. Okay, it's a centaurea. I absolutely love that. Now let's come back to me for a second, Danny. Okay, we're talking about larkspur. We're talking about feverfew. This is the cornflower or bachelor's button. Cosmos. Tithonia, which these are all fantastic cut flowers, but they're all fantastic bird, bee, and butterfly. We're talking about foxglove, California poppies, different poppies. Okay, particularly the larkspur, the feverfew, the cornflowers, and the poppy can be purchased now. And within 2 or 3 weeks, just clean out various little spots in the garden where you've got the space, and you can actually plant a few of these seeds. Now, I'm suggesting you plant a few of these seeds in the ground and then save the rest in a cool, dry place. And then you can replant the rest of them in August. And those plants will come up, go through the winter, and bloom even earlier than the ones you plant now. I don't necessarily suggest that you start these indoors because they're a little difficult to transplant. If you do, I do highly recommend these wonderful little uh, capsules that you can plant your seeds in, and then you plant capsule and all in the soil, because that way you're not disturbing the root system of that particular little plant. I suggest that you pick up Tithonia. Now, this is a large one. This one grows 2.5 to 3 feet tall, but we don't carry these types of plants in the garden center as plants because they get tall before they begin to bloom. And most everybody that comes into the garden center wants to buy a plant that's in bloom, and they wouldn't be able to do that with those. Foxglove is quasi-perennial. We do sell those, but start them from seeds, and you can put those down right away. They are absolutely beautiful. Tall spikes, wonderful, wonderful plant. Okay, let's go back to the slides, Danny. This was the cornflower, our bachelor's button, and you can see it has a wasp or some such thing on it right there, but they all love these plants. Okay. These are the poppies. They are spectacular. They really are. And they love to be at the edge of the border or scattered within it too. And there's a lot of different varieties. So within a couple of weeks, get some of those sown. And again, save some, plant a few more in another month, and you'll stagger the blooms of these. And once you have all of these things established, depending upon when you mulch and how well you mulch, we'll talk about that in the next segment. Okay, these are all wonderful cut flowers and beautiful in the garden. Okay. Again, I'm into cups and saucers. Okay. So here are some of my favorites. I brought in some of those deep blue larkspur, and I think there's some of the bachelor's buttons in there, and zinnias. You just cannot beat zinnias, and so many different varieties of those. Zinnias as cut flowers, absolutely. Let's go through some more, honey. Okay, let's talk a little bit about hydrangea, and we'll talk more about hydrangea later. And I hope to get a blog up soon on pruning hydrangea, because that's confusing to a lot of people. I love hydrangea, and the market is flooded with absolutely beautiful, beautiful hydrangea now. It is a marvelous cut flower. But again, coming back to me for a minute, Danny, let's talk a little, just quickly, about hydrangea. We get a lot of complaints. My hydrangea did not bloom, particularly those mop head hydrangeas or macrophylla. Okay. I keep on hand this harvest guard. It's very thin and very lightweight. If in April, late March, early April usually, if there's a heavy frost predicted, I go out and cover those that are particularly exposed with this lightweight harvest guard, and I secure it with these staples. Looks like a great big old hairpin, but it's called sod staples. Wonderful way. The other thing is, hopefully, you did not trim back those mop head hydrangeas in the fall, and don't trim them back now, because if you do, you'll be pruning away a lot of the blooms. There's a wonderful handout that we have here that explains that more deeply, and I'll go into it deeper another day. Okay, let's continue with these pictures. I want to get through most of this today. Okay, wonderful cup. Isn't that beautiful? This particular one seems to try to have different colored flowers. There's blue, there's pink, there's anywhere in between. So I haven't tested the acidity level there, so I don't really know what it is. And cascading out from that is a plant that I want you to make note of. It's Hacanacloa. It is a variegated plant. Right now, it's all brown, but sometimes those browns are nice in arrangements too. But it's beautiful in arrangements when it comes back fresh in the spring. I will cut all of those back probably in March, just before the new growth begins. Okay. Here is a fantastic cut flower, and I have this, a stilby. I have this in many, many different varieties and different colors. And 2 or 3 of those varieties really reseed. And so, and it's not difficult to get rid of the extras that you don't give them away. But this is coming up out of a mass of Pachysandra at the foundation of my house. And oh, they are beautiful. I believe I have an arrangement with that. Next one, Danny. Now, this is some of the varieties, actually. There's so many different ones. And the next one. Okay, now Brenda didn't take this. Hers was better, but I didn't get hold of that. Okay. This is an arrangement that I did for marketing using the various varieties of the mophead hydrangeas and 2 colors, I think, primarily the deep pink and the white of the astilbe. A very long lasting bouquet. Now, this is large, but it doesn't have to be that large. It can be smaller, okay? Next one. Another great cut flower in the garden are peonies. I know everybody loves peonies. Now, they do bloom over a period of time because they throw up a lot of buds. I'm not going to tell you which variety this is because they have, to some degree, reseeded. And I'm getting a variety from them. I didn't realize until a few years ago that they really would often reseed if you don't remember to go cut the seeds off. So peonies are great in the garden, but they're not terribly long lasting. They'll last for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's the end of it. But the foliage is beautiful after that. Among that is also some German iris, which I like to just snap off whatever's in bloom that day and bring it inside, because these are some of the queens of the garden. And those are the ones that I say you need to pull up a chair and sit down and enjoy them because they don't last very long. Now, the alliums do, and there are some purple alliums, different varieties of those bulbs that you put in the fall. Having said that, now I know at least here at the Fair Oaks location, we have potted up some of the allium and we have potted up some of the daffodils and tulips. And so there will be some available for purchase in the spring, but all of those particular bulbs need to be planted in the ground in the fall. Okay. There's a closer variety. This is one of the single varieties, which I particularly like to bring in as cut flowers. Their heads are not so heavy. The heavy heads of the peonies need to be staked. Okay. Next one, please. Okay. Again, things change at my house. I try different things in different places. This is a section beside my vegetable garden. And in the background is a rose that we inherited from a neighbor over 40 years ago. And he had had it in his garden, 50 years ago. He had it in his garden for at least 20 years. So that particular rose is a really old-fashioned variety that I do not know, has never been sprayed, and blooms like this every year, but it only blooms in the spring and is very fragrant. So I do have a few roses. I don't have a lot because I don't have a lot of sunny areas. This is one area that is now getting a lot more sun because I lost a huge tree back in that area. So I'll probably be able to grow tomatoes and peppers and that sort of thing better this year. Okay. It's getting more sunshine, but there are a lot of perennials in this area that I use for cutting. yarrow among them, and some other things, mints, and believe it or not, a lot of basil. They have beautiful blossoms too. Okay. Here is another area that I'm going to go deeper in, the seasons of bloom, because this is an area that is bordering the roadside in front of my home. And it does get a lot of sun. Consequently, I think the neighbors accuse me, or at least my kids accuse me, of trying to grow them in the road. But there's so much going on there. And this is 2 or 3 varieties of allium. There will be lilies coming into bloom. There's sedum there. All of these things can be cut and brought inside. Next one. Okay, this is beside the road, and this is another seed that I encourage you to pick up if you're interested. It is a wonderful, well, this particular Renee's seed calls it a jasmine. It's Nicotiana to me, okay? Hopefully they haven't changed the name of that. Oh no, it's got heirloom Nicotiana. It's Nicotiana alata. It comes into bloom midday, goes into the evening, is incredibly fragrant. You don't have to get down in its face to enjoy the fragrance because it comes up to meet you. But that particular variety isn't one that we carry frequently. We have beautiful Nicotiana, and I encourage you to use Nicotiana because it likewise can be cut. Some of these things need to be cut periodically and to be enjoyed inside, because when you cut them, you're encouraging them to continue their bloom period. So make a mental note, Nicotiana alata, A-L-A-T-A, okay? Next one, please. Dahlias. We are just beginning to get our dahlias into the store. They bloom midsummer till frost takes them out, and they are incredible cut flowers. When you come in and when you buy the dahlias, you can start, you can't plant those outside right away because they're not hardy right now to be planted in the ground. But you can start them in pots. Depending upon the last frost, let's say it's the last week of April or mid-April, I would start them at least 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time in a sunny window, or if you've got lights, you know, you can get them started and encourage those blooms to come sooner. Okay, Danny, I'm not sure how many we have left, but we need to get through it, right? Okay, lilies. We will have these coming in very soon. Now, this is one that when the ground is workable, needs to be planted. It's hardy. They are fantastic. I don't cut the long stems on these. I cut the individual blooms and bring them inside. And there are a lot of them that are really fragrant. Okay. This was a beautiful one. Oh my goodness. And this was in that garden beside the road. I just love these plants, you know, they're wonderful. Okay. All right. So hopefully I've introduced you perhaps to a few things that you haven't grown before. Talked about some seeds that are very important because I enjoy doing a lot of things from seed. As I said, on these that I've suggested that are hardy to you to go ahead and put outside, the foxglove, the cornflowers, the feverfew, the larkspur, and the poppy particularly, those are the ones that can be planted in 2 or 3 weeks when you can get outside and clear a certain area. Don't mulch on top of it, okay? And mark where you put it and what you planted there, and they can be done in small sections here and there. Plant part of the seeds, save some, and plant them later, okay? Those are the ones that are difficult to find in garden centers as plants. So is the Tithonia. Now, we do carry cosmos, but there are a lot of different varieties out there. Some of these you can start inside. I am going to start right away some of the sweet peas inside because they don't like hot weather. So I am going to use this little tray and plant right away some of these little sweet peas in these plants because they can take the cold. In fact, they like the cold. And so once they're up and I harden them off, I can plant them in the garden. Probably will plant those in containers. And since they climb, I will put some sticks into it for them to climb on. Okay. Other things that you're going to enjoy and make great cut flowers. I like them for cooking, but we'll talk more about some of these later, are nasturtiums. I particularly love to plant the Thai basil because, oh my, that one is very fragrant, but it sets a lot of blooms that, oh, the bees particularly just love. Okay, one that I didn't mention again that's very hardy is the love in the mist, Nigella. Okay, and you won't find that one as a small plant in the garden center either. Okay, wondering, Sally, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have quite a few questions. Thank you so much. That was really, really, I love seeing pictures of your garden. I always do. Um, so I have a few questions that have come in from a couple of people. So I want to get through those first. We
Okay.
had a number of people asking about the hardy geranium. Does that have a specific, like, is there a specific type or is it just the hardy geranium that you recommend?
It's geranium maculatum, Maculatum, I think is right.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, and we do carry that. It is a hardy geranium. It's beautiful. It blooms in the spring, but the foliage is magnificent and it grows with a fair amount of shade. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we had a number of people asking about that and I didn't know. So,
Yes.
okay.
In
So
the perennial section, Sally.
okay. Yeah, in the perennial section.
Yeah.
Um, Another two people were asking, one, what are the small scissors that you're using?
Oh, please. Your coupon, please. Thank you. I've used them for years and I've promoted them for years. They're Joyce Chin
Okay.
scissors, the best of the best. And get a bright color so that you don't lose them. I use them in the kitchen. They're wonderful for deadheading. They're great for cutting these flowers. I like a pair within my reach wherever I am.
Thanks. And what was the tool that you were recommending? It looked like a trowel. I missed the name of that. We had a lot of people asking.
Okay, it is a trowel, okay? It is made in America, which is wonderful. And we carry it here. I know at the Fair Oaks location, okay? We primarily have all the same things at these three locations, but every now and then I'll say, James, have you ordered this? Because you know it's my favorite. Okay, it's Wilcox, Wilcox, Wilcox All Pro. And it's the long one because it has leverage. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, when is the best time to plant galanthus and helleborus?
Actually, as soon as the ground is workable, you can plant the helleborus. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and we had a couple of questions from people. I know you addressed deer, but they were saying they had trouble with squirrels and rabbits digging up their bulbs.
Oh, yeah. That's a toughie. Okay. That's a toughie. I fight that battle all the time. When you first plant the bulbs in the fall, um, they tell me that this works. You can spray those bulbs with your repellents. Okay. I'm promoting Bobex because that's what I use. There are several others on the market also, and some people prefer one over the other. There's various ways. Now, rabbits usually will eat from the top, and there is one that is specifically formulated for rabbits. Okay, the squirrels, ugh, that's a $64 question. Keeping them from digging those up. There are various and sundry ways that people suggest putting hardware cloth, the big type. I don't do that. I've got too much space. I just have to take my chances. And pretty much the only things that they go after in my garden are the tulips, you know? So if you've got a few tulips, you can protect those with perhaps some chicken wire is better than hardware cloth, okay? And cover it with mulch. They'll come through that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, we had one person said that they ordered and planted galanthus this year, but it hasn't come up yet. Does that
Yeah.
happen based on the weather, or is there some other issue at hand to keep in mind?
Well, the galanthus can be a little tricky. Galanthus should really go back into the ground just as soon as they're available for sale. Um, there's so many galanthus, particularly in England, and now it's here in the United States, where they really fight for all these new varieties and so forth. And most of them claim that once you get those going, to transplant them in the green, which is fine, you know, but once you get them going, they'll usually reseed around by themselves. It depends upon the varieties, and I have 2 or 3 different varieties, and they've cross-pollinated because I have some I know that that didn't look like the ones I planted, some that are little short ones, some that are tall ones, and in between, and bloom at different stages. So maybe they just haven't come up yet, but most of mine are showing some green now. But give them another 2 or 3 weeks. Hopefully, they'll come.
Thank you.
Okay.
I forgot to ask, a couple of people had asked about the name of the jasmine that you were using. Kind
It's
of
the
the
it's the it's the hardy jasmine, nudiflorum. I'd spell that, but I might get it wrong. Nudiflorum. That's close. Nudiflorum.
Perfect.
Jasmine nudiflorum, the winter jasmine.
Winter jasmine. Okay,
Yes,
thank you, Peg.
yes.
Can you share the name of the ground cover that was with the species tulips back in your presentation in your garden?
Yes, it was Tiarella, Tiarella, Tiarella. There's Heuchera coral bells. There's Heucherella, which is a cross between the coral bells and the Tiarella. And they all do well in part shade. The ones that really creep out and become ground covers best for me are the Tiarella and the Heucherella. And I'm particularly fond of the Tiarella. They creep nicely and make a great ground cover, and they throw up blooms in the spring, which you can pick those and bring inside also. Love it. And they are evergreen. Now, when I say evergreen with some of these things in the wintertime, they certainly don't look as perky as they do when they do in the spring and whatever, but they're still beautiful and they still have a great presence even in the winter.
Thank you. One question I wanted to address, because I have a feeling a few people are wondering about this. One person posted and asked us, when you cut your flowers from the garden and you bring them in, is there anything that you do to make sure you're not bringing in bugs?
Well, there's not a whole lot that you can do. I bring them in all the time and I rarely have some issues. You might bring in an ant or two if you're cutting your peonies and you don't shake them or kind of knock them a little bit. But usually those are not the ants that you have a problem with in the house anyway, the ones that make a little scream through. So that's not usually a problem. If there are things like little aphids on something, you can usually you can squirt them off with a heavy hose to get rid of them. Generally speaking, I don't have that problem. I'm not anti-chemical, but I am incredibly judicious use of chemicals, and I use almost nothing in my garden because of the birds, bees, and butterflies. But I really have very few problems because I have so many things to take care of them and eat them, you know. So I don't usually worry about that too much when I bring stuff in. Not usually a problem.
Can you talk a little bit about if you have a garden that's not in full sun? I know your garden, parts of it are and parts of it aren't, but
Yes.
are there any particular plants you would recommend specifically to people who don't have full sun?
You know, hopefully, Sally, we're going to schedule a couple of of these seminars online about shady gardens, because there's a lot to talk about those, and there's a lot of things that do well there, because I've done this for all these 60 plus years in the same garden. Can you believe that? um, Basically, a lot of the things that I talked about today need some sunshine. When I define sun and you go out into the garden center and it says full sun, that scares people, because they think they have to have full sun all day long. And you don't. It's amazing. These plants don't read those labels. If you have at least 6 to 8 hours of sun, particularly if it's afternoon sun, although I'm happy with morning sun, 6 to 8 hours can constitute full sun. For most of these plants, they'll do well. A few of the others, like the foxglove, the Nicotiana, will take a lot more shade and do well there among those things that I mentioned. But they will all take some degree of shade. And among the plants, the Nandina, the camellia, the boxwood, the acuba, or just Pyrrhus japonica, are just a few of those evergreens back here that are appreciative of not having the hottest afternoon sun. So there are a lot of plants that fit in that category. And as I said, with these bulbs, you're often told, plant them in full sun. I have the galanthus, I have the helleborus, I have all of those that we used to call minor bulbs, and they're certainly not minor. They bloom beautifully. Where they get that sunshine in at this time of the year and until the leaves come on the trees, and it's enough. They do a beautiful job. Now, they're not going to grow under evergreens, because that's deep shade. When you're talking about deep shade, you better talk about some fern and just a few things that will grow where it receives deep shade. But the best thing is observe your garden. Try to determine how much sun do you get and when do you get it. And there's a plant for you out there. Believe me.
Thank you,
I've done
Peggy.
it.
All right, it is about 1 o'clock. So I'm just going to take a couple seconds. First of all, thank you so much, everybody. If we did not get to your questions today, please know you can send us an email. You can actually hit reply to those reminder emails that came out. That goes to me, and I'm happy to share with Peg or a plant clinic, whoever it needs to go to. Peggy is going to be coming back on, I believe, March 4th. To do another class to continue on this cut flower garden discussion, to talk about good cut flowers for the later in the spring season going into summer. We just were talking about it, and Peg mentioned that this is too much material to cover at one time. So we're very thankful she's coming back. Let me see. Please remember, we're sending out your coupon and your survey later this afternoon. So it helps us if you can log in and check that. And Peg, before we close, is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that we've covered pretty much the territory right now. And I do hope you will fill out your survey, because we're always interested in what do you want to hear about, okay? And any suggestions that you may have, we're very open to that.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
thank you.
Much. Well, thank you, Peg. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you all again for the next class. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye, Peg.
Bye-bye.